Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I have a guest on the line. Of course, he's a first-time guest at SGT Report. His name is Louis Cammarosano. You know the website, it's smallgold.com. Louis, how are you?
I'm doing grand. How are you,
Hey.
Sean?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Let me ask you, just right out of the gate. You know, Louis, as they say, men go mad in herds and come to their senses slowly and one by one. And I just sort of feel like the U.S. government, the Pentagon, the State Department, the people running the show and marching us towards World War III with Putin and Russia have lost their minds. The fear is almost palpable that we're headed towards World War III. What's your take on what you're seeing globally right now?
I think what I'm seeing is there's a lack of politics, a lack of political philosophy, and you're seeing purely just interest in political power. And that's driving everything. And once they've got to that point, you can tell them they're lying, you can show them they're lying, you can have people report they're lying. As long as they deny it, they just carry on. And that's the danger is if you recall, if you're old enough to remember, it used to be political scandals would end the corruption. You either had to have a whiff of it or you mentioned it or there was a report on it. Now they've got the whole thing so sewn up that they will lie and deny and have the mainstream media just basically they're not report on lies or say it didn't happen. And I think that's where the danger is because they are so intent on pushing through whatever they want and keeping themselves in power.
Yeah.
And by doing that, that becomes dangerous because they're not guided by any principle. They're just guided by staying in power.
Yeah, right. Their lust for power is insatiable, and but they're being exposed by WikiLeaks, right? And you've got Hillary Clinton saying, "Why can't we just drone this guy?" And it's all in the wide open now. That's the point I keep making in my microdocs and my interviews. This deep state, this shadow government, is now being exposed for what it is, and the Mockingbird mainstream media colluding with the deep state to prop up Hillary, to prop up the lies about these wars. You've got NBC creating this fear component about the cyber threat from Russia and them influencing our elections, which you know as well as I do is absolute nonsense. They've provided no evidence whatsoever that Russia is influencing our elections. What's influencing our elections is people waking up to the core of corruption, which has gripped our government.
What you have, Sean, you have these two trios. You've got government and politicians, banks and corporations, and media pushing one agenda. And then they're pushing that onto three types of people: the unaware,
Yep.
the accepting, and the aware. Now you would think, well, at least the aware could somehow raise the consciousness and point out what they're doing. However, who are they going to point it out to? Who are they going to complain to when you see the corruption at the DOJ, at the CFTC? So even pointing out the issues by the aware falls on deaf ears because you saw. I don't know if you saw the recent leak today. They were talking about a shadow government making these quid pro quo deals to make sure that the that no indication that Hillary Clinton had classified information on a server was released. And you see that between the DOJ and the Department of State. So they're playing their own game, and it doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks about it because they're the ones you're going to complain to. If the Department of Justice is in charge of enforcing the laws, and they're showing you they're not going to enforce the laws. I go back to when Comey gave his press conference and you did a podcast that day and you said the republic has died. The guy laid out everything he did wrong and he says, but we don't prosecute this kind of stuff. So being aware doesn't really help. What I'm saying, what doesn't help, the only way anything changes, and this ties into how markets are when we say that markets are going to collapse. There's going to be these. No, they're not going to collapse, Sean, because it's their game. They've created this hologram or this mirage that the market is the economy, that what happens on COMEX is the price, whatever it is, it's their news, their game, and they're not going to lose that game. The only way they lose that game is if you play outside the casino burns down and is placed under new ownership. But if they're in control of this entire perception and they have you focused on it and they make you believe that the market is the economy, when the stock market goes up, evidence that the economy is well. When they release their job numbers, if they say they're good, well, then the economy is good because the job market is good. Whatever data they're in control of putting out, or whatever everything they want you to look at, they'll always control that as long as they're in control. So those indices are not going to collapse as long as they control them. The collapse has already happened.
Mm-hmm.
They're just putting up a smoke screen trying to tell you that it hasn't happened. So that's where I say that when we say things are going to collapse, you can't fool Mother Nature, as Andy Hoffman is a very good thing that he says. But you can't fool Mother Nature, but you can still rig markets. And that's exactly what they're doing. And they're getting us to believe that the markets are reflective of the economy. And we're all saying, well, that market's going to collapse. Maybe it won't. But that doesn't mean that the underlying economy is still doing well.
Right. Well, let me ask you this then. As we watch what's happening in Syria, and we know this is an engineered crisis, right? There's absolutely no reason to bring the world towards the brink of World War III over Syria. There's no reason that the powers that be, the State Department, can't pull back from the brink and have a conversation with Putin, which Trump has suggested would be quite valuable. How much of this is because the hegemony of the US dollar is beginning to fall? How much of this is related to our economy and our economic, the Western banking system? How much of this warmongering and this engineered crisis in Syria is due to the fact that the world is losing confidence in the United States government and the US dollar? We saw what happened in Libya. You know, they went in there and they turned Libya into a hellhole because Gaddafi didn't want to deal with dollars and wanted to have a gold-backed dinar. How much of this is because of the US dollar?
Well, I don't know how you can ascribe a percentage to it, but as you know, when you have a fiat currency, that currency is based on confidence. And the confidence has to be well established that the government is honest, the government is powerful, and the government can do what it says. And what we saw in Syria was they didn't do what they said. They kept saying, we got a red line here. No, no, it's over there. Never mind this. And then there's stories about funding ISIS, as you were seeing in the WikiLeaks. So the confidence is lost internally when the people of the United States see this and they say, well, what's this? Well, then the only other way that they can boost back the dollar, besides threatening to raise interest rates, is militarily. Because the petrodollar is based not just on oil, but based on the defense of Saudi Arabia, which is based on the United States' superior military capabilities. So it's the same in Syria. And if you think of what's happened in Syria, this never would have happened during Kissinger and Nixon. Say what you want about them, but they kept Russia out of the Middle East. And now Russia's in there, and it's a complicated situation where they're supposedly attacking our enemy, which is ISIS. Now, who is our enemy in the Middle East? Is it Assad? Is it Syria? We don't know. We don't have a clear idea of why the United States is in the Middle East in Syria. And if we remember, people forget that Kerry and Obama about 2 years ago were pounding the table to go bomb Syria. And our own allies told them no. And so a lot of this has to do with, do people have confidence in the foreign policy and also the domestic politics? What we're seeing right now with these WikiLeaks is a government, or at least the Democratic and the Hillary Clinton machine, gone absolutely corrupt, and with mainstream media complicity. And I'd have to add with Wall Street complicity, because they're the ones that pay for her to give these speeches.
Yeah, you're right. And I saw a piece of news that Chuck Todd, the Mockingbird mouthpiece over at NBC, I believe he's at NBC. I think
Yes,
I
he
think
does meet the press.
Yeah, okay, right. And he held a party for the Clinton campaign insiders. Now, this separation, they talk about there should be a separation between church and state. There absolutely should be a separation between the press, the fourth estate, and U.S. government officials. And we don't see that anymore. We see I think the classic definition of fascism, which is these otherwise opposing parties working together, colluding.
Right.
That really makes us a banana republic, doesn't it? Because if the government is no longer beholden to rule of law, then we don't have a government. We have a illegitimate government. This is a corrupt, illegitimate government.
What you have with when you see these mouthpieces on media, first of all, the purpose of a free press and the purpose of giving extra First Amendment protections to the press is so that they can expose issues with the government. So in other words, if you want to have the Supreme Court cases show that the press can get away with much more in terms of libel and defamation unless they have a much higher standard to meet before you can go after the press. Well, this press has no interest in going after the government. They have every interest in protecting the government. And so you mentioned Chuck Todd. I saw him interviewing Mike Pence, and he had his talking points. It was going to be about Donald Trump on the bus or Donald Trump on the plane. He wasn't going to talk about it. If Pence brought up anything other than Trump's on the plane or Trump on the bus, Todd was there to shut him down and to get all fake outraged about what Trump had said. And that's what you're seeing in this entire cycle is you're seeing the media pushing that story. And if you remember, if you think about what press used to be, Sean, it used to be you had to impress your readers in order to get them to subscribe. And then if you got them to subscribe, you would get advertising. Now they know there's no money whatsoever in paid media, not the way they do it. So they rely on corporate sponsorship, and then they either write or don't write whatever those corporate sponsors say, or they rely on sugar daddies like Bezos or Carlos Slim, who use the newspapers as a mouthpiece for their own agendas. So they view it as a marketing expense. So the journalists, so to speak, they're not out looking to get a story. They're just taking orders. They're meeting with the DNC, they're meeting with Soros, they're meeting with whomever who's paying them to write what they're going to write. And that's why you're seeing real journalism. I don't know if you saw this. I think I sent it to you. This O'Keefe guy did this undercover investigation
Yep.
of the DNC and how they actually pay
Actors.
people to go and disrupt Trump rallies.
Yep.
So it fits the narrative that Trump is causing violence at his rallies. And that's journalism. That's going undercover and exposing that type of story. And then you would think if you were a real journalist and that story wasn't one that you covered, that when that gets dropped on your lap, you'd at least report on it. What does the mainstream media do? They don't report on it at all. They have not reported on basically anything on WikiLeaks. It's all about Trump on the bus and Trump on the plane.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because they need to stop him.
Yeah, they ignore the real news that's being produced by the alt media. And that O'Keefe piece you mentioned is incredibly important because it proves everything that people have been saying that, the Trump rallies are peaceful. And it's these, what would the word be?
They call putting people in the front of the line bird dogging. That was one of their own words.
Yeah, they call it bird dogging, right. They pay these actors to go in and disrupt. Well, let me ask you this. You sent me another piece, too, which I didn't even get a chance to read yet, which I think the headline was Loretta Lynch had lunch with Soros. I mean, you want to talk about the globalist dictatorship taking over our government.
Dinner it was. I hadn't read it when I sent it to you. I read it. I saw it was dinner, and she said the only reason she was going to do it was for politics to make Soros happy. So that's what's important. You need to make Soros happy. Not you need to represent your constituents. You need to make Soros happy. And this isn't only one example. And as I mentioned, 20, 30 years ago, any of these little leaks, they're not little, they're significant enough to bring a candidate down. And here we see she just forges on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in her case, we're talking treason. I mean, we're definitely talking crime, the crime of perjury in front of Congress. So she literally could be tried for her crimes and put in prison for what she's done. And yet this crooked, mainstream Mockingbird CIA media props her up and targets Trump. It's beyond the pale, and I think that it is the last gasp of a dying empire to be this blatant and overt. I actually just did a microdoc the other night called Framing and Blaming Putin for World War III, which cites the fact that the deep state is now in the wide open. We can see it. The deep state being the bankers, a crooked government, crooked politicians, and the mainstream media colluding and working together. It's just as blatant as any banana republic. I think now I'm repeating myself, so we can move off this and on to precious metals if you'd like.
But it is 100% obvious now, and the fact that they're silent, the media is silent on it, and the fact that they continue to push, what about Trump on the plane? What about Trump on the bus? It makes it so plain, patently obvious. And one thing you can hope for is that the people see this, even if they're unaware, and they kind of start to scratch their head and they say, why don't they get off this topic here? And one thing it is helpful is that every day there's a new leak
Yeah.
and they don't have a new woman to come in every day to counter it with a accusation. So they have to stay with the old story from 2 or 3 days ago's accuser.
Yeah, that's right. And some of these accusers have, already been discredited. Okay, well, let me ask you this. For those of us that have been following precious metals and investing in physical gold and silver as a way to protect our future from an economic tsunami, are you as tired as I am of what they've been doing to precious metals? Number one, are you as surprised as I am? And number two, is this just going to go on forever?
This is the same thing as creating a reality that doesn't exist. If you look over the last 4 or 5 years, the silver demand was off the charts. Even according to CME Group, even according to Silver Institute, no matter who you talk to, they show that there was a massive deficit. The CME Group didn't show a deficit because they only included industrial demand. They just ignored the 45-50% investment demand. But the Silver Institute, when they show silver, they showed a deficit, and they didn't even include the supposed silver demand for ETFs. So demand and supply and demand have nothing to do with the price of silver and really nothing to do with the price of gold. It is all calculated based on what they deem sentiment, and they get the big money participants to play on COMEX futures contracts, and that's how they settle the price. There could be, and that's why I say the COMEX is not going to collapse. They run that game. There could be 10 ounces in the vaults. There could be no ounces in the vaults, and they will still trade based on the understanding that they're just trading some concept of price, and that's all they're interested in.
Hmm.
And so, therefore, the prices of gold and silver, which should have gone up over the last 4 or 5 years based on massive Indian demand. China and India didn't even have demand like they have now 10, 15 years ago. So if you're going on supply and demand, the price should be astronomically higher, but it's not. It's all based on this paper game, and it's in their casino, and that casino is not going to default. It's not going to collapse. The only way you'll get true price discovery is if it's based on the physical market, and it's not right now. If you think about it, Sean, the price of any commodity is different anywhere you go in the world. What you pay for eggs, gas in your town is different than in my town. Why is the gold and silver price the same all over the world?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, let me ask you this. Do you find it odd that when the SGE was closed for a week, they were able to murder silver, or I think
Yes,
more than $2 an ounce, and now the SGE is back open? Of course, just so people know, I think there was a Chinese holiday, so it was closed for a week. They
for a week.
slaughtered silver, and now the SGE is back open, and we have not seen silver bounce back very much. It's stabilized, but what's your take on that? Is the SGE ultimately going to help us find a real market price for silver?
Well, not necessarily, because when you have an oligopoly, they generally tend to chase each other. You don't even have to have price fixing in oligopoly. One does one, and the other they just kind of follow.
Hmm.
And the Shanghai Gold Exchange has no interest in boosting prices. They're interested in accumulating the metals at a lower price. So it's not like they want to like raise the price. Now they may wish to allow the price to go higher once they've accumulated as much as they can, and they want to back the yuan with gold. Then they're going to want, and they want to have a greater percentage of the reserves in gold. They're going to want the gold price to go higher. But I don't think that one or two, three markets really provide you with an accurate price discovery mechanism, because you see what's happened. It really has nothing to do with supply and demand. And I also don't think a lot of people are hoping that, well, if we go to a gold standard, then the gold price will go up. And then, yeah, then the gold price will be fixed forever and you'll have no further gains on your gold. That may be enough, maybe if you have enough gold now. But then the price is fixed as it was from 1933 to 1971, totally manipulated, because the gold price, if you remember, from 33 to 71 was fixed in 1934 by an act of Congress at $35 an ounce, and stayed that way all through Bretton Woods till 1971, when they removed it from the global financial system. So I don't even think, I'm not hopeful, and I don't want there to be a gold standard, because once you do that, then the governments control the gold, and you have no price appreciation, and you have nowhere to turn. Now you're stuck with taking their money. Now there is always silver, which is not part of any monetary system, and no central banks own silver. So that may be a good thing for silver, because silver then would have to float higher if indeed a government put gold in a gold standard. But then once they do, they have to fix the price because they can't have it fluctuating all over the place.
Right. Do you ultimately think that we will have a return to a gold standard, whether it's on a global scale or in this country after the collapse? Do you think that the SDR or anything that the IMF and World Bank may be working on will involve gold?
It might, but again, I don't want that to happen. I
Hmm.
don't think that having governments control the gold is a good idea because they'll play games with it and they can do it overtly. They can say it's in our interest. We have to fix the price of gold. I would prefer that the gold price be set not by government fiat, not by being part of some ridiculous scheme like the SDR, but rather based on the supply and demand of gold. If people want gold for jewelry or they want it for investment, that should reflect that. It shouldn't reflect some government dictate that gold has to be at this price to support our currencies.
Right. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to go back and do the research on how much paper gold and silver was thrown at the market between the years of 2001 and 2011. We saw gold run from 260 up to $1,900, and since 2011, we've seen gold go from $1,900 down to 1,250. It just seems to me that the world is in far worse shape economically speaking than we've ever been in, and yet we see gold and silver, pounded.
Well, it's because they've demonetized them.
Yeah.
They insist in the media that it's not worth much, pet rock, and so on. And it because it trades not on the physical supply demand. It trades on sentiment, and they create the sentiment. And most traders are content. And see, that's another thing is once they agree, it's just like fractional reserve banking. No one should have their money in the bank. If you have money in the bank, you know that they don't have your money in the bank, why do you keep your money in the bank? Because everybody accepts that, well, yeah, that's how it works. It's 10 to 1, but if I need my money, I can get it. And so far, you can go get your money. There's a dollar shortage. There's only, I think, $1.23 trillion worth of physical cash. 70% of it's outside the country. So even if people just wanted to convert their digits into cash, there's not even enough cash for them. But that doesn't seem to bother people. And it's the same with gold.
Hmm.
People are, if there's, they don't want the gold. They want the paper contract. They want the digits on their screen that says they have this much gold, it's worth this much, and then they take those digits and they can go buy stuff with it, and they're happy with that.
Hmm. All right, and now we see Deutsche Bank offers to pay $38 million dollars in silver price fixing case, and still we'll hear people say there's no grand conspiracy to fix the prices of gold and silver. You people are crazy.
But there has to be. I mean, if you're going to set interest rates, what you're trying to do is manipulate an outcome. You're trying to manipulate the markets. There's no such thing as a little manipulation. Well, we're just going to do the interest rates. If something interferes with your interest rate manipulation and doesn't give you the desired outcome, then they have to manipulate the media, then they have to manipulate other markets. And if they have to manipulate gold, why wouldn't they? We're seeing this whole economy is based on manipulating a perception and an outcome. So manipulating gold and silver is a no-brainer. You can't allow gold and silver to go higher, and it looks like it's competition to the dollar if they're trying to trying to promote the dollar. And by the way, it's not just the dollar. Every other central bank that's on a fiat standard, which is every other central bank, has an interest in not promoting gold and silver
That's right.
because it undermines their currencies too. So this isn't just let's pile on the dollar here. They're all in the same game. They're all tied in the sense to everybody believing in the confidence of central banks and that what they're doing makes sense.
All right, couple more questions here before we lose you, and I just want your opinion on how bad you think the U.S. economy is right now versus the propaganda matrix of what they're feeding us. How bad is it? How dire is the breakdown of the U.S. economy?
Okay, so the stock market, as we mentioned, there's no correlation whatsoever. It's at all-time highs. The United States is not at all-time highs in terms of productivity, profits, innovation. So you throw that out as an indicator. Then you look at the housing market. Higher prices, that's great. Housing recovery. No, if you look at home sales, you have the lowest home ownership rate since they started capturing it 50 years ago. You have lower sales. New home sales are at 1960s levels, even though the population is 40% higher. So the housing market's in no good shape. Sure, home prices are more expensive. That, again, helps people who already have a house. It doesn't help people who don't have a house because they can't afford it. So the higher prices go, they're telling you that's a good thing. There's a housing recovery. No, it's a bad thing if you're trying to buy a house. And then the worst is the job market. You're looking at under 5% or 5% unemployment. And we know that that's a farce because how they calculate unemployment, they don't count people who are not supposedly, according to their definition, in the workforce. You've got 92 million people outside of the workforce. The labor participation rate is down, and the only group who the labor participation rate has increased since 2009 are those 55 and older. And it's a dramatic increase for those 65 and over, which means those people can't retire. They're either coming back to the workforce or continuing to work. So their labor participation rate is higher. The people in their prime working years, 25 to 54 years old, that labor participation rate is down. That's bad for those people and it's bad for the country. And then they tout again, this is part of the hologram and the mirage, but the initial jobless claims are at the lowest ever. They're going down, they're going down. That's for two reasons. There's fewer people left to fire. There's fewer people in the labor force, but also because people now can get that have been out of the labor force, already collected their unemployment insurance, they can't collect it again. They come back into the labor market. What's available? There's plenty of part-time jobs available. And there's actually more jobs available now than there were 5, 10 years ago because many companies have set up their workforce and transitioned them totally to part-time. So instead of, if you used to need 500 employees to get the job done, well, once you go to part-time, you need at least 800 to 1,200 employees. So there are more jobs. And those people that used to be unemployed now can go get those jobs. Maybe they get two jobs. That all makes it look like the job market is robust, solid. The stock market goes up. Interest rates are low. The whole thing is a mirage. So what I'm saying is that the entire economy is in a very bad place. And the only people that defend it are those, and you can see it on social media, those people that work in the financial services area. They think it's great. They look at the data. People that are economists that are basically paid by the government at universities, they think the economy is great by their measure. But in the real world, the stock market is not a measure of the economy. These job numbers are not a measure of the economy, and higher home prices are not a measure of the robustness or strength in the economy. So for the average person, they have no savings. They have no ability, if they had savings, to make any interest on those savings. So they're either forced into the stock market casino, or basically they just have to hold on to their cash and struggle to get by. And if they do go off grid and buy gold or silver, there hasn't been much of a return on that either. So there's really not this economic recovery going on that they claim there is. No more than there's this popular upswelling for people to vote for Hillary Clinton in November. And yet that may be the outcome.
Right, they're going to shove her down our throats until we accept her as the president. And I guess I've
But
been
it's but
wondering.
it's but it's not just her. They're shoving down your throat the concept of economic recovery. They're shoving down your throat everything they want to tell you, everything they want you to believe,
Yeah,
which goes against what the facts are.
yeah. Okay, final question, and I'm beginning to sound a little bit like James Lipton here, ending each show with the same question for every guest. But let me ask you this: you know that 1988 cover of the Rothschilds Economist magazine with the phoenix rising from the burning pile of fiat dollars, with a
Right?
gold medallion around its neck, and they're telling us the Rothschilds are saying, "Get ready for a world currency." Now that's 30 years ago. 28 years ago, and that medal said, get ready for a world currency in 2018. What do you think of that forecast? And what does that mean for the dollar?
Well, there is a counter revolution going on, which is decentralization. And you saw over history where all these countries, they used to be city states and they became larger. You got Italy, you got Germany, the United States, large countries. And now you're seeing a devolution. You're seeing Brexit. European Union was even bigger than Germany or France or Italy. But now you're seeing a populist revolt against too much of this globalization. You're seeing it in the Trump candidacy, so with Nigel Farage. And I think if things, unless they try to force something, and I don't think you can force globalization. They're testing it right now, but I think at some point you will start to see a counter-cyclical 200 or 300 year period where things start to return to smaller, more easily controlled entities. So you have it in Catalonia where they're trying to pull themselves from Spain, Brexit. Scotland wants to now get out of England. There's secession movements all over the place, and I think that if they do try to push something like that, I don't think the whole world can agree on it. I don't think China, Russia, the United States, EU, Japan can all agree on a global currency. And I think you're already starting to see the United States dollar was the global currency. And that's gone from like 75, 76% of all international transactions down to 63%. I think I would like to see more regionalization, more localization of things. And that seems to be where naturally the world is headed. But I think those that are interested in globalization are pushing or trying to push the globalization to its limits. And I hope that doesn't happen. I'd like to see more local and regional control in
Yeah.
currencies and everything, in politics, in
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, yeah, me too. That is that would be the ingredients for liberty. Would be a return to local control. We got to throw off the chains of these globalists and their UN Agenda 21 and
Because
Agenda
they
2030
they
policies.
don't serve anyone other than those
That's right.
who run the system.
That's right. They serve, yeah, their own self-interests. They're anti-liberty self-interests.
Right.
They're self-interests of total global tyranny. And fortunately, people are waking up thanks to WikiLeaks. And then, of course, what do we see? We see this government target WikiLeaks and Assange, wondering if we can't drone strike them, in the words of Hillary Clinton. And we see them shut down RT, Russia Today's bank, via RBS. The tyranny is just blatant. Louis, thanks so much for your time. I very much appreciate it. We shout out your website for folks so they can find you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. It's smallgold.com. I try to put up something once or twice a day. And I also have a YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to Small Gold, and I will send you not an email every day, but an email if I think something is important and as an alert. And so if you just subscribe to Small Gold, you'll get those alerts. And thank you very much, Sean, for having me on.
Well, it's been my pleasure. And guys, the website is smallgold, spelled like this, SMAULGLD.com. Of course, you can see it on the placeholder of this video. So go and visit Louis at his site and say hello. Our guest has been Louis Cammarosano, smallgold.com. Thanks, Louis.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, guys, and thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful week ahead, and thanks for your support. Thanks for checking us out over at sgtreport.com. Real news, 24/7. God bless.